UFC 322 is behind us, but ahead of us is another UFC fight night as the Ultimate Fighting Championship goes to Qatar for what is a very, very intriguing card and a pretty stacked fight night. So we're going to take a look at what should be a very fun fight card coming up here on Saturday afternoon. UFC Qatar going down this weekend. Very, very good card for a fight night. This is certainly not just an Apex card. You look at the main card, and there's intrigue in basically every one of the bouts. So let's take a look. Let's start with the first fight on the main card in the flyweight division. Kyoji Haraguchi going up against Tagir Ulanbekov. Apologies for some of the pronunciations here. But Horiguchi coming into the Ultimate Fighting Championship off of a defense of his risen flyweight championship, the inaugural risen flyweight champion coming into this one, having not lost in a really long time since he stepped into the Bellator cage against Patchy Mix. That was back in 2022. He was 29-5 at that time. He's now 34-5 with one no contest. Horiguchi on a bit of a roll here. A former UFC fighter, if that's a name that sounds familiar, but then I said Ryzen, and you're, oh, I guess not. A former title challenger against Demetrius Johnson back in 2015. His last fight for the promotion was 2016 before he made his way off to Japan to kind of start a very good run in Risen. A flyweight champion with one successful title defense, two-time bantamweight champion as well, and the 2017 bantamweight Grand Prix champion, also a Bellator bantamweight champion. He goes up against Ulanbekov, 34 years old, out of the Soviet Union, out of Dagestan, sorry. He comes into this one at 17-2, riding a good win streak himself, having lost to Tim Elliott back in 2022. He has won 4 in a row since then, but there is not one fighter on that winning streak that gets to the level of a Horiguchi. Yes, I understand that maybe the gas tank wearing down for Horiguchi, a lot of big fights as a 35-year-old against a 34-year-old, but just not with the volume of high-level competition there. So maybe there is a bit of diminishing returns for someone who's 34-5 against someone who's 17-2, but I like Horiguchi big in this spot. I just think a very talented fighter is going to be able to come out with a win. This was supposed to happen earlier in the year, but Horiguchi had to withdraw, so it has been moved to this weekend. But again, I like Horiguchi in that particular spot. Up next, we have Jack Hermansson against Miktebek Oralbai. Sorry, again, on the pronunciations. Oralbai is 27 years old, out of Kyrgyzstan, 14-2, with a win in his last fight, but lost to close out his 2024 dance card. This is only his second fight of 2025, taking on Jack Hermansson, who's now 37 years of age. Hermansson has alternated wins and losses for a while. He beat Jacare, to let you know how long ago it was. Beat Jacare in 2019, lost to Cannonier, beat Gastelum, lost to Vittori, beat Shabazian, lost to Strickland, beat Curtis, lost to Delice, beat Pfeiffer, lost to Gregory Rodriguez back in June by knockout at UFC 317. So, by that back and forth, he should get a win in this spot. But I think that this is, I think this is Oralbai's time. I don't know if this is the most intriguing prospect that is out there. Has won some titles on the independent circuit out in Kyrgyzstan and in Russia, but I don't think Hermansson has a whole lot left in the tank at this particular time. A fantastic run as a UFC fighter here, but I view him as someone who that time has kind of run out. And so I think Oralbai comes away with a victory in that spot. Very interesting fight at light heavyweight as Volkan Ozdemir, the 36-year-old former title challenger in the Ultimate Fighting Championship, right? He's fought for a title before. Has he not? Yeah, there we go. Lost to Daniel Cormier in a string of 3 losses in a row. He's now 20-8 for the career, coming off of a loss to Carlos Ulberg back at UFC Fight Night in basically a year ago, a year and a day. Away from this fight was his last one, going up against Alonzo Menafield, 38 years old. He has won back-to-back fights in the UFC after losing back-to-back fights, after winning back-to-back fights after a draw. But he's put together a pretty good run, but again, not a big high-level resume. I guess Jimmy Crute, maybe the bigger name on there. Misha Serkinov, if it was a few years ago, but lost to OSP back in 2020. Either way, Menafield hasn't really been able to find that stride. Going up here against Ozdemir, who again also kind of hasn't really found that either. I like Menafield in this spot. Again, it is just I don't really know how much Ozdemir has left to give. Not that Merrifield's actually older at 38 years old, but I just feel like, again, from a fight age standpoint, he still has a little bit left in the tank, and I think he is going to be able to get the job done. Really big fight at welterweight as Ian Machado Garry takes on Belal Muhammad. Belal coming into this one at 24-4, coming off of a unanimous decision loss for the welterweight championship, losing the belt to Jack Della Maddalena, who just lost that belt. Taking on Ireland's Ian Garry at 28 years old. Garry is someone who I have been hard on at times, and I felt like he was trying to do a bit of a Conor McGregor light performance. I don't view that of him anymore. I was impressed. The win over MVP, how he competed in the loss against Shavkat Rakhmonov, and then how he won against Carlos Paredes. I think that the style that Belal is going to want to fight, I don't think he's going to be able to do that against Machado Garry successfully. I think Garry dealt with that against Shavkat, and while he lost, absolutely he lost, he was still able to survive in that way, and I think Shavkat is better at that than Belal is, and I think that Machado Garry can be good enough on the feet to be able to kind of dictate things a little bit his way, so I like Ian Machado Garry to come up with a win over the former welterweight champion. And then in the main event, lightweight bout between a couple of vets as Arman Tsarukyan, at 29 years old, out of Georgia, goes up against Dan Hooker, the 35-year-old from New Zealand. Tsarukyan continues to fight to win big fights and say, okay, this is the time for a championship, and then has to fight another one to get to that title. Most recently, a split decision win over Charles Oliveira. Dana White appears to be pissed at the guy for not being able to make he got sick for the championship fight that he was scheduled for. So we will see what he can do now against Dan Hooker, who has been a very strong fighter in his own right. Looked like maybe things were coming to an end. Lost to Makhachev, lost to Arnold Allen, but 3 wins in a row against some pretty good competition. Most recently, Mateusz Gamrot in a split decision win back in August of 2024. But again, it's Tsarukyan's time. I think that Tsarukyan kind of a little bit better in a lot of different areas than Dan Hooker is. And so because of that, I think that there is, I think Tsarukyan can hang on the feet with Hooker, and I think he's going to be able to wrestle with him as well and control him pretty well on the ground. So I think Tsarukyan comes away with a decision victory. But again, a pretty solid card for the UFC for a fight night. Let me know if you disagree with any of my predictions, and we can talk about those either in the chat or in the comments.